Gus wants to say hi before we start. Hey, you want to say hi? No, you want me to pet you? Obviously. Kids these days. Alright, so let's talk about test 5. Alright, so chapter 5, obviously. This has 50 questions. Section 1 is conjugating verbs. It is 1 to 15. So number 1 to 15 verbs. We talked about, or we studied regular AR verbs. That means verbs that are not irregular. I used verbs from your vocabulary. So I have given you an infinitive, and then I'm giving you a subject pronoun, and you are conjugating it. Okay, just like the past couple tests, I think we've done that. So it'll be something like blank, yo, habla. And so AR verbs, you take off the AR ending, you add the new ending. Because the subject pronoun is yo, the ending is o, so it becomes hablo. Okay? The screen looks a little bit blurry. I'll just use a different marker. Okay, so endings for regular AR verbs, remember, are o, as, amos, and an. So yo gets an O, tú gets an AS, él, ella, usted get A, nosotros gets amos, ellos, ellas, ustedes get an. Remember that I said that these two get flipped a lot. Usted and ustedes often get mixed up, flipped backwards. Just remember that ustedes is plural, so you have to have 2 letters instead of 1. I don't know if that helps. When ustedes has an S on the end, that means it's a plural word, double or two letters instead of 1. There's more than 1 letter. This one just has so singular, plural, if that makes sense. Okay? So, eraser. Let's do this. Okay. Section 2 is 16 to 20. This is dealing with indefinite articles. Okay. Remember that indefinite articles are a or an in English, which means that they are un, una, unos, and unas in Spanish. So I've given you a noun. It says write the indefinite article that matches the noun. So it doesn't give you this as a hint. You just need to remember that indefinite is un, una, unos, unas. So I might give you something like quesos. So this is masculine and it's plural. So this one is masculine and plural, so you'd say unos. Okay, pretty simple. All right. Part 3 is 21 to 28. This is vocabulary. It is from Spanish to English. Okay. It says include the article if applicable. So, like if there's an L or a la, then you have to, like, if one of the words is el piano, you have to say the piano, not just piano. Also, most of your vocabulary for this chapter was verbs. They were infinitives. So, you have to remember that if a verb is an infinitive, it means to verb, okay? So that means that if I said something like, oh, I don't know, enseñar. This means to teach, okay? You can't just say teach, okay, because that can mean I teach, we teach, okay? If there's an AR on the end, it means to verb. That means that you have to say to teach, all right? So if you don't have a to, I'm going to count some points off, all right? Okay, part 4 is, I wrote a 6. I don't know why I did that. 29 to 34. And this is English to Spanish, okay? So there's some musical instruments, like there was a section on musical instruments, but most of your vocabulary was verbs. So most of the vocabulary is verbs. There are some musical stuff though too. All right, part 5 is 35 to 38. Okay, this is going to be personal ah. All right, so remember that a personal ah is what we use when the direct object is a person. Okay, so okay. We visit my brother. He's off at school. We're going to visit him. We visit my brother versus we visit the museum. Okay. We is the understood subject. Nosotros is the understood subject. So my subject is nosotros. My verb is obviously visitamos. This is my direct object. This is my direct object. Okay. El museo. When your direct object is a person, you have to have a personal ah. Okay? If it's not a person, you don't need a personal ah. Got it? Makes sense, right? Person. Personal, person. If it's a person, you include an ah. So this is kind of what it's going to look like. I'm going to give you a sentence with a blank before the direct object. If the direct object is a person, you include an ah. If there's not a person, then you just either leave it blank or like draw a mark through it. I don't care which one you do. Okay? All right. Then part 6 is 39 to 50, and that is translation. There was a lot of stuff that we covered in this chapter. 6 is, what did I say, 39? Oh, I did it again. I started writing 6. 39 to 50. Translate the following sentences to Spanish. So remember that one of the things that we talked about was prepositions before pronouns. So what we do is remember that if you have one of your pronouns was con, C-O-N. Okay, con. Now, when you have a preposition, it means with. When you have a preposition, you can put the subject pronouns after it. They change names after that. They're just like personal pronouns to mean like yo or el. Okay. As a subject, el means he. It means that this one can act as a subject of a sentence. He works. He runs every day. He runs the business. He goes to Puerto Rico every summer. Okay. But if this pronoun comes after a preposition, con, detrás de, para, etc., it changes its meaning from he, which is a subject, to him. Okay? So if I had something like, you don't know that one. How about he talks with you? And he talks with you. Okay. If I had a sentence like he talks with you, we would say él. Then we have to conjugate to talk, which is hablar, for he. Remember that él, ella, usted gets an A at the end, so it becomes habla. Okay. And then we have con, means with, and you. Remember, we can use any of the subject pronouns we want with prepositions with two exceptions. If you have a preposition, you can have, let's see, yo, to, él, ella, usted, nosotros. Daddy just got home, and so Gus ran from the backyard to the garage because he heard the garage door open. It's pretty adorable. Nosotros, ellos, ellas, and ustedes. Okay? Now, you can have a preposition plus any one of these except for these two. Remember that after a preposition, yo becomes me, and to becomes T. I'm sorry if that's too much writing all at once. Okay, so if I have a preposition, then yo becomes me, to becomes T. Bonus, if these two come after con, they become conmigo and contigo. Okay? Okay, so when you have con and you've got yo or with me or with you informal, it has to be conmigo or contigo. The other prepositions like para, antes de, detrás de, entre, whatever, everything is just me, ti, él, ella, usted, nosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. All right, with that said, an example is going to be something like this sentence right here. He talks with you. So, él habla con, and then if this is informal, okay, then informal you is to. So, to has to transform into T, and after con, it becomes contigo. Right? So, why do I have L in parentheses? I'm officially lifting the subject pronoun ordinance, okay? So, you do not have to include the subject pronoun anymore, unless you want to, all right? So, this, in this case, is optional, right? Okay, what else? One thing that's going to be in the translation section is adverbs. I do not remember what page those are on, but it was the adverbs, I think, of intensity. So it was like muy, bastante, poco, I said algo. I always forget what the other ones are. But you'll need to know those. So like very, somewhat, rather, quite. Many. You had many was one of your, I think, an adjective. We had adjectives of quantity, maybe. Yeah. Mucho, many is muchos. Remember that mucho has to match the noun that it's modifying. So if I said bananas and I had many bananas, then it has to be muchas. If it were a singular feminine, then it would be mucha. If it were singular masculine, it would be mucho. If it's masculine plural, it's muchos. All right. A lot of this is going to be AR verbs. So once again, I took verbs from your vocabulary, and you just need to know how to conjugate them. Obviously, you need to know what they mean as well. Another thing that we talked about was infinitives, uses of infinitives. Remember that an infinitive means to verb. It's a verb that ends in AR, ER, or IR. We've only talked about AR verbs, so all of your infinitives are going to end in AR in this case. We had different ways and circumstances that we use these in. We had impersonal expressions. We had helping verbs. We had I like, you like. I think those were the only ones that we talked about. Impersonal expressions, unfortunately, they didn't give you a ton of examples with that. But if you look at page 97, there was an activity that dealt with impersonal expressions. Yeah. It's activity 4 right here. You need to know pretty much these words right here. Like if I put S in front of these adjectives, like what would it mean? So like the first one is bueno. That means it's good. Malo, es malo is it's bad. Es interesante, it's interesting. Es importante, it's important. Okay, so most of the words, not most of them, a lot of them are kind of cognates. So that means that they sound like the English word and the Spanish word sound the same. So if I said something like, and that's on page 97. If I said something like, it's good to study. Okay. It's good to study. This is impersonal. So we say es bueno. Okay. And then we have to study. We know this has to be an infinitive because it's to verb. That's literally what we're trying to say, and an infinitive literally means to verb. So the verb that means to study is estudiar. Okay? So it's good to study. ¿Qué más? Remember that there's a difference between tener and tener que. Okay. Tener is possession, like to have. I have a marker. I have an eraser. Tener que is an obligation. It's like have to do something. I have to cook. I have to shop. I have to read. I have to study. So this, when we have tener que, we use an infinitive after it. So it's like have to plus an activity. This part gets conjugated, and then this is the infinitive. Okay, so what that looks like is let's see. I have to walk. Trying to think of verbs that were on your vocabulary list. I have to walk. This looks like I have, but you've got to be paying attention to the fact that this is an obligation. I have to walk, okay? So you'd say, yo, remember this is optional at this point. Tengo que. To walk is caminar. Tengo que caminar. The thing I'm concerned about is that you're going to say have, and you're going to know, oh, I've got to use tener. But you're going to forget this right here, okay? You're going to say something like tengo caminar. That is, I possess walking. Doesn't make any sense, does it? Tengo que caminar. Once again, we use an infinitive to verb, to verb. Other helping verbs were like, I think there might have been quiero, necesito, I need to. Might have been all. I don't remember. So just make sure you're looking at the helping verbs in the book. The other thing that we had was I like expressions. So if I said something like, I like to, let's say, worship. That was one of your words. I like to worship. You would say, me gusta alabar. Okay? I like, remember it's not translated literally. It's worshiping is pleasing to me. I am pleased by worshiping. I like to worship. This is how we translate it. So you've got to know that I like is automatically me gusta. Then you have an infinitive after it. You like, informal, is te gusta. You like. Okay. Another thing that we talked about was indefinite and negative words. Indefinite and negative words. Those were like algo, alguien, algún, siempre, nada, nadie, ninguno, and nunca. So remember that if you have a negative word, if your negative word goes after the verb, you have to have a double negative, which means that you have to have a no before the verb. So if I said something like, do I have an example? Okay, you don't ever prepare. Technically, the word is never, but we would never say don't never prepare because then that means that you do prepare, so that's what the double negative looks like. But you would say, let's do a formal this time. Usted no prepara nunca versus you never prepare. Oops. Usted nunca prepara. Okay. So the difference is that there's an nt and a negative here. So there's a double negative here. So that means that the no goes before the verb and then the negative word goes after. If the negative word is before the verb, then you can just stick the negative word before the word in Spanish as well. Usted nunca prepara. That might be it. If you had something like she has to cook some food. Remember that this is obligation, has to. So we're going to use tener que. Ella is optional, so ella tiene que. To cook is cocinar. Some food. The word for food is comida. Some. This is an indefinite word because it's not saying she has to cook 10 tacos. It's just kind of an indefinite in general number. Some food, so we use alguno. Okay. But remember that alguno and ninguno have to match in gender and number to the noun that they're describing. Since this is feminine, this has to be feminine as well. If this were a plural word, this would have to be plural. I'm going to tell you something else. And now I can't remember what it was. Maybe I don't need to. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so translations are going to cover AR verbs, infinitive constructions or uses of the infinitive. They're going to cover prepositions with pronouns. They're going to cover specifically impersonal expressions, helping verbs, liking, you like, I like, do you like, do I like. Most of the verbs are going to come from your vocabulary. These are some words that you're just going to need to know how to say. You're going to want to know instruments, which I think was in your vocabulary. You need to know the word for words, which is palabras. You need to know the word for God, which is Dios. And you need to know homework, which is tarea. Okay. Also, I just realized you need to pay attention to the personal ah when you're doing these translations. Okay. So if your direct object is a person, not a preposition. If there's a preposition, it doesn't count. You don't need a personal ah if there's a preposition. Like with her, con ella, you don't need a personal ah. But if you are calling her or calling her, walking her, like your dog, pets technically count as people, which we all know is true because pets are people too. But you'd have to have a personal ah. Let's just say that if there was a sentence like about worshiping God, if you worship God, God is the direct object, so you need a personal ah. Okay, so there you go. Remember that Bible verses are extra credit. If you get questions wrong, first they count against wrong answers, so they cancel out wrong answers. If you've already gotten 100, then they start counting 1 point apiece. Yes, you can say Jesus wept as a Bible verse, but you have to get it exactly right, and you have to get the reference exactly right, because it's only 2 words, so it doesn't count if you mess it up, if you mess up 1 word. You need to include the references in the verses. You also have 3 extra credit questions that are dealing with the culture. It was like meals and Bolivia, and there might have been something else. But so the extra credit questions are on the culture stuff, just like always in the chapter. So, yeah, that's it. So Gus wants to say hi. Gus, come here. Actually, he doesn't, because Daddy has food. Oh, here we go.
He follows the food. He's not done. Good boy.
Oh, puppy. A second ago, he crawled up into my chair with me. It was pretty cute. All right, so anyway, there's your test. And please be sure that in addition to test prep that you're actually reading the chapter. I think I may have said this before, but I'm going to say it again. When you test prep, you need to be reading your notes. You need to be going over stuff that specifically we talked about in test prep. But you also need to actually be reading the textbook at least once, just so you know you see anything that I maybe missed. All right, good luck.